Boa noite. Continuando, então, a segunda parte aqui da nossa mesa, será uma apresentação com o Michael Karagosian. Os temas que a gente vai continuar abordando agora são complementares ao que a gente traçou aqui na primeira parte. Com a presença dos convidados que precederam ao Michael, a gente pôde ter um panorama da situação real que vive essa cadeia do cinema digital aqui no Brasil. A gente falou dos formatos, padrões, das dificuldades, dos desafios, das oportunidades, e a gente está vivendo agora a instalação de um novo formato, né? O cinema digital, o DCI. A gente assiste no cinema salas com projeção 2K, a gente está habituado a já ouvir falar em Ks, 2K, 4K. Já temos algumas salas em 4K aqui no Brasil, temos salas em 3D. E o futuro do cinema, como eu disse atrás, o cinema não para. E nós não estamos nem no presente, já temos o futuro aqui. Vamos ter uma boa visão com o Michael do que viveu o mundo na sua transformação, da adoção do cinema digital e do futuro próximo. A gente tem agora, no final do ano, o Peter Jackson lançando o Hobbit a 48 frames por segundo, em 3D. É uma tecnologia nova, hoje não tem nem salas com isso ainda. Mas o filme já está para ser lançado. O mercado, os produtores, né, buscam público no cinema. Buscam preservar a sala de cinema cheia. E o cinema está sofrendo competição com todas as outras mídias, como a TV está sendo dilacerada, vamos dizer assim, pelas mídias sociais, pela segunda tela. Né? Tem pesquisas que mostram que nos Estados Unidos 70% das pessoas usam Twitter ou texto enquanto assistem TV. E até uma tendência disso poder chegar ao cinema, de usar a segunda tela do cinema. E para falar desse passado, presente e futuro e dar uma visão global, a gente vai convidar o Michael. Michael Karagosian, ele é presidente da MKPE Consulting, que é uma empresa de consultoria baseada em Los Angeles. Foi criada para o desenvolvimento dos negócios em cinema digital. Ele já vem trabalhando há 30 anos na indústria cinematográfica e nos últimos 12 na implantação do cinema digital, dando consultoria para fabricantes, desenvolvedores de softwares, integradores de sistemas, empresas de telecomunicações, organizações governamentais e organizações comerciais. As suas atividades recentes incluem a negociação de acordos de implantação do cinema digital na Filipinas e Irlanda. Foi também assessor da UK Film Council para o Digital Screen Network e o membro do conselho de administração da Intree, que foi a primeira empresa de conversão do cinema 2D para 3D. No final dos anos 70 e início dos 80, Michael liderou o desenvolvimento de produtos dos laboratórios Dolby, onde foi o responsável pelo Stereo Surround para os filmes de 70 milímetros e do primeiro processador de som THX. Ele presidiu comitês de padronização do cinema digital na Associação de Engenheiros de Cinema e Televisão dos Estados Unidos, a SMPTE, incluindo também o desenvolvimento do DCP, dentro do DCI, que a gente falou logo atrás. Recentemente, ele recebeu o título de Membro Honorário da SMPTE e, atualmente, ele preside um grupo de estudos do High Frame Rate, que é o grupo que está padronizando a alta cadência de frames no cinema. Então, em vez de você assistir a 24, você passa a assistir acima disso, 48, 60, 96, o que vier. Então, queria convidar o Michael. Por favor, recebam. Michael Karagosian.
Thank you, Jose. Now, if I speak too quickly or it's not clear, raise your hand. I can repeat and try and explain things a little more slowly. My presentation will be in 2D. These are for the end, where we will show some high frame rate content. I got my start in cinema, I'll date myself here, 30 years ago, working with Dolby Laboratories and developing stereo surround for 70 millimeter film for a movie called Apocalypse Now. And I fell in love with the business and have been in it since. I've been working in both the technology side and in business development. 12 years ago, I began working as a chairman on the standards committees for digital cinema. I had a lot more hair then, so you have to be careful when you start working in digital. And I've been working on virtual print fee deals as well. I brought digital cinema into Ireland through virtual print fees, and more recently into the Philippines, and now working here in Brazil to bring digital cinema here. So I span a lot of areas, but what we're going to talk about today is the rollout and the technology behind it. I want to try and provide some background and understanding behind digital cinema, where it is, how it works, and some of the new technologies that are coming into play. You can see here, this is the U.S. rollout, and you can see that it's just enormous. We've really taken off in the U.S. We're at the 70% level today in the U.S. So we talk about getting to 80% a year and a half from now. That's not hard to believe. Now, I'm going to switch mics. You can see here, well, the blue is pretty level, and the blue represents 2D. The red represents 3D. So all the growth that started up here was actually 3D. 3D has been the driver of digital cinema for the adoption. And what really took off here is the release of Avatar. This was the release of Avatar. That's what started this huge growth. And you can see towards the end of this growth curve that what really grew was 2D. So 3D started it, and virtual print fees is finishing it. That's how digital cinema is rolling out around the world. Now, worldwide, it's even more spectacular, the amount of growth that's taken place. Because we're now at the 70,000 screen point in the world. That's how many digital screens we have out of 120,000. It's an amazing transition. And again, you can see here on the bottom, this is North America. The next level up is Europe, and above that is the Asia-Pacific region. And then Latin America is the gray area above. A lot of that is actually in Mexico. But that will soon change. This is the total picture of the world. The bars represent all of the cinemas. The red represents what's not converted. The green is what has converted. So you can see in Europe, we're 65% there. In North America, 70% are converted. In the Asian Pacific region, we're at 53%, and 22% in Latin America. So you see we have a lot to grow here, but that will change in the next couple of years. Thank you. The drivers behind this, as I said before, started with 3D. Digital cinema originally conceived was a replacement technology. Replacement technologies are not exciting, they're not sexy, and they take a long time to get adopted. What made digital cinema different to the exhibition community was 3D. And that's because, and I'll show you a little bit about why that's true later, but the quality possible with 3D was way beyond what we could do with film. So 3D became the driver that started adoption, but 3D only created a small footprint. A 3D screen here, a 3D screen there, a 3D screen there. And that's a very painful arrangement for both exhibitors and distributors to have both digital and film and try and support both. So the studios had started a program of virtual print fee financing in the US and carried that program around the world to fill out those screens with digital. And they've been very busy closing virtual print fee deals in Europe and in the Asian Pacific region, and now coming into Latin America. Digital Cinema Initiatives is a joint venture of the 6 major motion picture studios. And you hear a lot today, you've heard a lot about DCI. So DCI has a specification, and I'm going to make a distinction here. It's a specification, not a standard. The standards are by another organization called the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, which is SMPTE. SMPTE began working on standards in January of 2000. DCI released its specification in July of 2005. The standards process is what drove DCI, not the other way around. What DCI has done is put together a specification that's very important because it says follow these standards, and it says 6 major studios are behind this. And to the banks, that's very important because the financial community now knows that this format has backing. When we talk about the DCI specification, I want you to think about this as the 35 millimeter of digital cinema, and that it's as a real baseline for digital cinema. And I'll show you why that's true. When we talk about the technology behind digital cinema, we first go down to the composition. The composition is how we package a movie. The composition has a group of files. Each file type represents a different essence of content. So there's a file type for picture, a file type for sound, a file type for subtitle, closed caption, and so on. We can add to this. For instance, when we started, we didn't think about closed captions. That was added later. We did that without breaking digital cinema. It was still compatible because if you couldn't read it, you just didn't read it. We organize these files temporally, in time, in blocks. And we call that a digital reel because that's how you might, that is a better picture for people. Everybody understands a film reel. These are digital reels. But digital reels are not just one file. They are this group of files, this vertical group of files. So when we talk about higher frame rate or 3D or this sound format or that sound format or this language and that language, what we're talking about is replacing these files. We're not talking about breaking the system. And in distribution, that actually creates a huge amount of flexibility. The composition playlist, or the CPL, which is the term you probably have heard if you're involved in digital cinema, the CPL is what is the playlist. It tells the system how to play all these files. So that's the instruction piece to the system. Now this is all hidden to the user. When we ship this, we call it a DCP. Oops, I hit the wrong button. So now you have to go through this again. And one more after this. And there we go. When we talk about when you hear the term DCP and you don't hear the term composition. And that's because what gets shipped to the theater is a what we call a digital cinema package. But a digital cinema package can contain one or more compositions, or it can contain a partial composition as shown on the right. So when we talk about shipping a DCP, it's not that a DCP is a complete movie. That may be the case simply because of a business practice, but that's not the way it's defined. A DCP can contain a partial composition. And the value of that is that when we go back to how this is constructed, let's say that we want to ship a different language track to a different theater. What we do is we ship a different CPL and a different language track, and that's it. That's how we ship two different versions of the movie. So we ship a complete set of files, and then if we have extras that we want to add on to, such as another language, it just takes another CPL and another set of audio files, or another set of subtitle files if that's what we need, or another set of closed caption files, or if we want a 3D version of the movie, we send another picture file. That's how we break it up. So all these files can be shared. It's the CPL that says to the system, you have all these files, this is how you play them for this version of the movie. That's an important concept to get because this is not possible in film. In digital cinema, we have a wide range of possibilities that occur that are possible in distribution. So the distributor has a tremendous amount of flexibility to distribute a version that works at every site. So for exhibitors who are worried that they buy this equipment today and it won't play the movie tomorrow, it's actually not true. The distributor has the flexibility to provide every version of that movie for your site and for something that might be 10 years newer. It's a business decision to do this, not a technology decision. And I'll give you an example, a real example. Avatar went out with 80 different CPLs. 80 different versions of the movie were created so that it would play everywhere in the world. That's what goes on today. That's how this is being handled. Now, I want to describe a bit about encryption because it's complicated. I'm going to try and simplify it because I think it's a very important piece to understand. When we have a composition, we want to encrypt it. We actually only encrypt some of the files. We don't have to encrypt all the files. That's a decision, that's a business decision, not a technology decision. It's not necessary to encrypt any of the files. It's really a business decision whether or not they're encrypted or not. But that business decision is made more often than not, that the files get encrypted, and they get encrypted with what we call a symmetrical key. And that's what I call here the content key. The content key can, the symmetrical key can lock the file, and it can also unlock the file with the same key. Now, that's a very valuable key, that key that can lock and unlock that file. This locked composition will go everywhere. We don't create a different version that's locked here, a different encryption for this theater and a different encryption for that theater. It's the same encryption that goes everywhere. Now, how we manage that is we create what's called a key delivery message. You hear the term KDM. The KDM is created, is a separate file, and it contains this red key, the content key. It contains it and encrypts it. Now, this is a mandatory issue on the KDM, that it is encrypted. But it is encrypted with the public key of the media block. The media block is in the cinema. So that's how we lock the movie to a particular machine in a particular cinema, is through the KDM, not by encrypting the content separately for that cinema. To encrypt, so I want that concept understood, because to encrypt the entire DCP, that's 200 gigabytes or more of material. That's a lot of stuff to have to do for every cinema. Instead, we do the same 200 gigabytes everywhere, and we do something that's 1 megabyte or less for the KDM. And the KDM is emailable. In fact, most theaters receive their KDMs today through email. Now, when you get into the theater, we again have this media block, and the media block has a key pair. It has this public key and a private key. This is asymmetrical encryption. So we talked about the content was encrypted symmetrically. The KDM works with or the media block has asymmetrical capability. And we take that private key out of the media block, now that it has the KDM, and we unlock it. Only the private key can unlock that KDM, and the private key is not exposed to human eyes. No one sees a private key because it's in secure silicon. And this whole process then takes place again in secure silicon. The private key is decrypted, and then the content key is exposed, and then that unlocks the composition. And that's what a media block does. So the DCI specifications, about half of that specification explains this process and how it works. From a behavioral standpoint and such, it's mostly focused on the security of the system. So when we talk about standards again, there are some standards that support this, but how they're applied is described by the DCI spec. The standards describe all the other things, such as how you do 2K, how you do 4K, what an audio file contains, how these things are all done in an interoperable ways. So there's a workflow issue here. When we have a public key, we need to have the public key. We need to have the public key down here to create the KDM. I think this is probably not working. We need the public key to create the KDM, but the public key is really, that green key is really sitting up in the media block. The green key is really up in the media block, and we have to get it down to here. So to do that, we have a process called a facility list message. And this has not been introduced into Brazil yet, because this is very new, this process of taking the facility list message and pulling that public key out and bringing it to the people who are creating the KDM. But I'm pointing this out is that these are the kinds of, digital cinema has its frontiers that remain to be addressed. And this is one of them that's being addressed now, is bringing that public key out in a automated fashion. When back at the media block, we can then pull the KDM over to the media block in an automated fashion through a process called TKR. And this is very new. This has only been discussed since December of last year. It's a very new process, and it's one that's now being introduced on a test basis. But it looks like it will work everywhere. And once this gets going, it'll be in theaters all over the world. Everybody hears about 3D, and I like to use film frames to explain how 3D works in the DCP and in the projector, because it's so visual. Inside the DCP, we have a left-right pair, and that works at 48 frames per second, 24 frames per second per eye. That's what's not possible in film. When 3D was run on film, it was running at 24 frames per second and then less per eye, and then there was flicker issues and such like that. It was very difficult on film to make it look good. In digital cinema, from when it was as it was first introduced, it started out at 48 frames per second, 24 frames per eye, and in the projector, a sequential projector, such as a Texas Instruments DLP projector, would then show it as at 3 times that rate. Left, right, left, right, left, right. The same left-right pair flashed 3 times to get rid of all flicker in front of our eyes. And then that results at 144 frame per second image that we actually see on screen. So this was not possible with film. You can't get up to those kind of speeds in film, at least not in a production mode around the world. It's just too much to do. So digital was unique, and this is why 3D was absolutely unique in digital, why it was really helped be the value-added component that drove digital adoption. Now, when we talk about higher frame rates and what we're moving into this year with Hobbit, we're looking at a faster frame rate. You hear the word 48 frames per second being used in terms of reference to Hobbit, but we're actually talking about 96 frames per second. It's 48 frames per second per eye. So it's twice as fast as what we have, but the total frame rate that we're running in the composition is 96 frames per second. So that's actually twice as large as if we have a 200 gigabyte file size for standard movies. We're looking at 400 then for this movie or more. Inside the projector, when you were working at this speed, then we're looking at 192 frames per second because we're only going to flash twice. So at 24 frames per second, we triple flash. You hear that term, triple flash. At 48 frames per second per eye, we double flash. So that you'll hear this type of language as higher frame rate starts getting rolled out. Now, if we move to 60 frames per second per eye, we're talking about 120 frames per second total, and we don't flash at all in a sequential projector because at that rate, there's no jitter in the movement to be seen. But the limit doesn't stop there because we have folks like Doug Trumbull, who some may know as the originator of ShowScan, if you have that kind of memory on cinema, or if you've done your history work. Doug Trumbull is still working very hard on high frame rate and is shooting at 120 frames per second per eye today. He was just shooting some test material in that a month or two ago. And his idea of shooting at 120 frames per second per eye is that you can create all of the frame rates below that out of that out of that product. So by working with different shutter angles and by combining frames correctly, you can get the motion blur correct for 60 frames, for 48 frames, and for 24 frames out of that 120 frame per second per eye shots that you start with. And this is possible because of digital cameras today. Now, the digital workflow for that is huge on the production side because your storage requirements just go out of sight. But this is the sort of things that are being worked on today by people such as Doug Trumbull. Higher frame rates is a big topic today. And in the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, higher frame rates has a study group. I get to co-chair this study group along with two other crazy guys, Comer Klein and Dave Stump. Comer Klein's with Imago. He's a well-known cinematographer, and Dave Stump, I think, is himself well-known down here in Brazil. And it's an incredible opportunity for me to work with these people. We are working on all the aspects of higher frame rate that we don't understand yet. We have manufacturers that have produced equipment that's capable of some capability of higher frame rate. Peter Jackson's group through Park Road Post has picked 48 frames per second as something that they believe will work today in the field. But to get to higher numbers than 48 frames per second per eye, we're going to need more, we expect, than what we have in current media blocks today. We need a higher bit rate of the compression. There's a big concern about getting to the correct quality levels. So we are planning tests as I speak here. We're in the process of planning tests to investigate this. So that's where we are today on this higher frame rate side. We all hear about dark screens in 3D. And we hear about the image looks dull, it's not bright enough. It's difficult to get to high brightness in 3D because the 3D add-on technology absorbs about 80% of the light. And so it's not just a matter of the exhibitor getting a larger bulb, because often they'll have the largest bulb available for their projector. It's the fact that 80% of the light has to get thrown away in order to do the 3D. So this is an issue today that everyone's dealing with, is how to get to brighter projectors and how to overcome this tremendous loss of light and get to brighter 3D images. But I want to point out that while we have standards for luminance in 2D digital cinema, 14-foot Lamberts, open gate, so to speak, we don't have any standards in 3D. And that's because we don't have equipment that we feel could support a number that we would want to support. If we wanted to support 6-foot Lamberts or 8-foot Lamberts in a standard, we don't have equipment that's widespread in the world today that can do that. So there won't be any standards, my prediction, until we get to a better set of technology that can get to brighter, more luminance for 3D. So what we target for today is 4-foot Lamberts, but what we're actually getting can sometimes be less. And it's a tough situation, but one that we hope will improve by different technologies that are starting to come out. Now, another development that's going on is the introduction of media blocks that go into the projector. So the distinction here is that in the original digital cinema, I said old, 5 years ago, in the original digital cinema, we had media blocks inside the server. And we had what's called dual link HD SDI as a linking protocol between server and projector. That's good up to 48 frames per second, that link, at 2K. And it works at 24 frames per second for 4K. It doesn't work for anything higher than that. And we need media blocks to go in the projector to get to being able to support high frame rates. So in terms of the conversion cycle, Brazil's actually at a lucky point, because the majority of projectors that will come into play inside of Brazil will have media blocks inside of them, and so you'll have the most state-of-the-art advanced product available. To cinemas, for instance, in the US that began rolling out in 2005 and 2006, they don't have this. So we'll actually see more state-of-the-art cinemas coming into play around the world than we will in the US, ironically. And but that's just one of the many challenges that take place in the technology movement. Media blocks in the projector also lead to lower cost projectors. And the reason for that is that the projector companies themselves are starting to build these products, and they'll take the margin out of the product and try and get to a lower cost projector in that way. But another advancement is taking place. There are smaller die coming out now for imaging devices. Texas Instruments announced this year that they will introduce later this year a 0.7-inch chip. Today, their smallest chip is 0.98 inches. Now, that die size reduction doesn't necessarily create a huge cost savings for a projector, but the reduction in optics is huge. So what you see on the right is a prism assembly that's in a DLP projector. It's an incredible technology all by itself, and it's very complex, and it's very expensive. And when it needs to when it needs to be designed for high brightness, it gets even more expensive because it has to absorb a lot of infrared light. So anything that can bring the amount of light down, such as a 0.7-inch, will help reduce the cost of the optics, and we can get to what we hope to see is 5,000 to 6,000 lumen projectors at a much lower cost than what's available today. And this should be sufficient, we think, for 10-meter wide screens and less, which is a lot of the screens around the world that remain to be converted. Now, another development that we hear about today is laser illumination. Now, laser illumination has a lot of promises and a lot of challenges. The economics of laser illumination are that it's what I would call exchanging CapEx or OpEx for CapEx. We're exchanging the cost of electricity for the cost of a new illuminator. So instead of buying xenon bulbs over a period of time and paying for a lot of electricity as well over that time, you pay a lot of money up front for a laser and you consume a lot less electricity over a long period of time. Over some period, 5 to 10 years, these numbers balance each other. The cost of operating xenon bulbs and replacing them frequently, and the cost of operating a laser. So where that number falls remains to be seen, because we don't hear manufacturers talking about this yet. But that's the trade-off that occurs with laser illumination. So it's not that laser illuminators are going to be cheap and that they're just going to be in every projector. They're going to be more expensive. But the expense will be traded off between the cost of electricity over a long period of time. There are regulatory issues in laser illumination. Regulators got involved with laser light because entertainment systems would take laser beams and bounce them around, and they could get into people's eyes and cause damage. So every country, just about every country in the world, has some regulation against using lasers in public. These regulations affect laser light in the use of laser illumination in projectors. You can't introduce projectors today into the world because most countries won't allow it. So there's a lot of work to happen yet on overcoming the regulatory side. Laser illumination in the cinema is safe. It's a homogenized beam. It's not a laser that's pointing around. It's not scanning the screen. It's a homogenized beam. It's just a different way of producing that same homogenized beam that comes out of a projector today. But to get that education across the regulatory world and get it across and get it into the legal side of that is a long process. And so this is a process that has been started, but it has I'm sure it's going to have a long ways to go before we see lasers in the field. Now, the technology issues are there as well, but they are being overcome. Speckle is when you have a given wavelength, and a coherent wavelength, and it bounces off of a surface. The bounce creates another coherent beam, and if that beam has valleys and peaks that cancel with the incoming beam, then you see a dark spot or a bright spot, depending upon how those waves add. It's a very interesting effect, but you can only get this with coherent light, so that's why it happens with lasers. So the speckle appears as alternating dark and lightness in a color, and it typically comes into play with green, because our eyes are most sensitive to that. So that's what when you hear manufacturers talking about reducing speckle, that's what they're talking about, is working on that problem. Metamerism is a different kind of problem. Those of you who have worked in lighting will know that if you take different light sources and put them on the same color, you'll see different colors, or it'll come through differently on a camera shot, for instance. And that's called metameric failure. Metamerism occurs when three primaries of the projector, the red, green, blue primaries, are very narrow frequencies of light, such as could happen with a laser. I can balance that RGB combination to get a color that looks a particular shade of red, for instance, to me, but it will look different to you. And that's metamerism. We don't see this problem in xenon because our bandwidth of our primaries are so wide. Across a large population of people, it looks the same. We average it out. But when you get to really narrow frequencies, which is possible in laser illumination, then this problem comes into play. So that's the problem that has occurred with Kodak and such technologies like that, is having this metamerism problem. There are solutions to it, and that's what people are working on. So when you hear about demonstrations taking place today, these are the factors that are behind them, that are preventing them from coming to market. They have to overcome the economic issues, they've got to overcome the regulatory issues, and all these other technical issues as well. The reason why laser light is a popular topic is because it looks to be the most promising way to get to high brightness in 3D. And that's what's going to really drive this. And on the 3D side, we have sound. For 12 years, I've been playing around in all this image technologies and stuff with digital cinema, waiting for the day when we would finally get back to sound, and that day has come. My roots are in sound, and I really appreciate the efforts that are going on today. There's no less than 5 manufacturers who have introduced or at least discussed the introduction of 3D sound products. Dolby Atmos being, I think, the most promising and the most popular one out there right now, only having been introduced in the last few weeks publicly. But the specialness of this is that it's hemispherical. It covers the audience with sound in a way that's not possible today. The sound systems that we have today, 5.1, date back to when I started, going back to early 70 millimeter or late 70 millimeter film, and then into the 90s where 5.1 as a format became much more standardized. And that's just the 1990 introduction. Is 20 years old now. It's time for something different, and it's great to see this development take place. Now, when we talk about introducing 3D sound, people say, well, how are all these cinemas going to afford 3D sound? How are they going to afford higher frame rates or laser illumination or all these other things? That's why I wanted to show you the composition at the start of this talk, is that these are all layers on the DCI specification. They are not replacements. So you can distribute 5.1, 7.1 sound along with a technology like Dolby Atmos. The cinema that has Dolby Atmos can play the Dolby Atmos file. Others play 5.1. The movie plays. And that's the important thing that was true with digital cinema that was very difficult, if not impossible, to do in film, was to provide this huge amount of compatibility. Now, I throw this slide in because it's my favorite slide. All the cinemas, or most of the cinemas in the world, work with perforated screens. And there are some installations, maybe some exhibitors who may even be here, or people who have screening rooms, have experienced a moire pattern when taking a digital projector, which has a rectangular array, and putting it up on a screen, which also has a rectangular array. I've seen this myself, and I know of installations that have had this problem. It's a very difficult problem. Some get away, some just switch to solid screens and put speakers around the perimeter, which works great for the image, but not necessarily for the sound. So the technology, we have all these wonderful developments in technology on the projection side, on sound and such like that. The next big development I hope to see is changing the screen. And we get to a screen that can actually be, the challenge there is to get one that's transmissive for sound, but reflective for light. That's the real challenge. But I know there's work going on in this, but it's an area where I think we would benefit tremendously. So you take all of these things together, and this is when you start hearing the term Digital Cinema 2.0. So Digital Cinema 2.0 is the idea of introducing higher frame rates, better sound, brighter picture, and so on. Digital Cinema 2.0 can live alongside Digital Cinema 1.0 because of the flexibility of the composition, because of the way digital cinema works. So we will have in the future, my prediction is different levels of cinema. You're going to actually have a very high-end product that will be where you're going to hear the best sound and the best picture and such, and that may be where the movie opens and the movie moves down, and we're still in digital. We're still on the digital equipment that's been purchased, but we're still compatible. The movie plays, and it's not playing any differently than what you hear today. So you're still actually getting a really fine product. With Digital Cinema 2.0, you get a different and a more immersive experience. That's how I see this evolving. That concludes my talk. Is there any questions that I could answer? Don't tell me I confused you. You need this mic?
English. Michael? The question is, James Cameron said that some of the problems related to 3D projection, that headaches and people getting sick, has to do with the frame rate. And high frame rate will fix the problem. Is this his opinion, or there is a more serious study being done related to this problem?
High frame rate fixes motion problems, and the 3D problem is actually has multiple components to it. So Jim Cameron's right in that way. But there are different causes to discomfort in 3D. Some of that can be caused by vertical disparity in the image between left and right eye. If it's horizontal disparity in the image, we perceive that as depth changes. But our eyes aren't used to this. So when we see a vertical disparity, we get a headache. And that's one of the discomfort factors. Another factor is that he's referring to is the factor of motion. And I showed how triple flash works. The sequential triple flash motion, or triple flash of the image, it has a temporal component that can cause problems with our vision. And so in certain kinds of shots, that could cause a problem. It's said that the best way to view is actually to have simultaneous, like two projector type presentation of left and right eye, because that's the way the camera captures it. So if the camera's capturing it with simultaneous left and right eye, it's better. The scientists in this field will say that that's the better way to watch. What we do, though, in the cinema, because we barely can afford one projector, that we do the sequential presentation. So with some kind of materials, that may present a problem. Going to higher frame rates simply it gets rid of a different kind of problem in that. You don't have to do the flash, so any kind of problem introduced by flashing, taking it out of time, goes away. And the motion blur element goes away. So 3D becomes smoother in that way. That's what he's referring to in that. You're going to see some of that in this demonstration coming up. You'll see for yourself. Jim Cameron has shot material that's visible at some trade shows. You can see in some of the booths. Dolby has material that we're going to see today. There's trying to think of how much test material there is. I'm in the process of trying to collect test material just in order to run these higher frame rate tests with higher bit rate compressions. But those are going to be more of a test footage and such, not something, what I would say, compositionally interesting to watch. But you'll see for yourself on this demonstration that's coming up the very effects that Jim Cameron was talking about. Anyone else?
Michael, here. The adoption of the new technology on projectors may, in the near future, cause a replacement. Is there any projection how it will affect the small cinema owners that could buy used projectors for a lower price? Is there a study about it? Projections?
It's possible. That's always been a concern. It's a concern in every country. It's a concern in the United States, even though we look like we're 70% rolled out on a technology adoption curve, which looks a lot more like a Gaussian curve. We're on the low end of getting on the low part of this Gaussian curve, it could take a long time to fill out all those screens. We have around 40,000. Actually, between the United States and Canada, there's 42,500 screens. It's a lot of screens. And a large number of those screens that remain to be converted, even in North America, are owned by small cinema owners. So this problem is just as relevant, is just as real there as it is everywhere else in the world. How everybody converts is, we're not sure, because some theaters do second-run movies, and that's very difficult to finance on the virtual print fee finance model. Some theaters are just owned by small families. They're just a small business that someone like you or me runs, and we don't want to sit and spend all this money because it's a lot of money to spend on this projector, and it was just meant as a small business. So that's, if lower cost equipment comes into play into the field, that's why that focus on lower cost projectors that I gave was we're hoping to see the equipment costs come down. Now your question is it possible for used equipment to come into the market? That is true, but for used equipment to come in the market, it means somebody's replacing their system, and that's, where did that money come from? And so that's this is how I see things. When we started out in this rollout around 2005, 2006, my guess at the time, and a lot of the projector manufacturers' guess, was that we'd get 10-year lifetime out of the projectors. Today, those expectations have grown. Those numbers have grown. 10 years seems like short time because this technology holds up so well that we think we'll get 15 years or longer out of them. So it starts getting, 15, film equipment can last 30 years. So we're not there yet with digital. But that's, this is a transition, and it's not an easy transition for a lot of theater owners.
Hi, Michael. You showed us some of the graphic of the digital adoption of the theaters. And could you give us some comments on how they're getting the digital content? I mean, the DCPs, how they're getting that by hard drives or by satellite, some of them. You have some numbers on that or some comments?
The answer is yes. They get them every way they can. I don't have numbers on the percentage of satellite distribution in the U.S. There is there was a contract that was actually just closed in the last few weeks called DC. We have lots of DCs in this business. And they are about bringing satellites to the satellite distribution into the major cinemas. But that deal has also to do with bringing live content into the theaters as well, and advertising content. It's a very complex deal. The challenge for satellite distribution is that it has a fixed bandwidth, and it takes around 11, 12 hours to get a typical movie over to a cinema. There will be errors in the transmission, and then you have to retransmit to fix the errors. And so this process takes a while. And as I said earlier, when you get to something like Hobbit, which could be twice as long or longer than take more file space than what you have today with a current production, it then takes twice as long with satellite. With a hard drive, the benefit of a hard drive is that it's this size, and the amount of storage on that hard drive grows all by itself. The cinema industry doesn't have to invest in that because somebody else is. Our computers want more storage and such like that, so people are out there busy developing hard drives that carry more content. So a movie can fit on one drive today. Tomorrow a movie will still fit on one drive because that one drive will hold more. So there's a point in this, if you can see where I'm going, where these two cost curves intersect. And I don't know where that point is, but that's the trade-off. There's a third technique for delivering movies that I see coming up on the horizon, and that's the development of cell phone network capabilities in countries like here, where the backbone has been built out to handle things like phones like this that are smartphones can have a lot of demand on these networks, so they build more and more backbone into these networks and more capability. They have the same problem that satellite delivery has, which is that at night these are just dark. There's nothing going on, and they have plenty of bandwidth to sell. So sooner or later, that's going to come into the marketplace too. So I think the ways in which movies get to the theater will simply be all of the above. Whichever one hits the price point, that's how it goes out. And I know certain studios that have told me that they hear about this satellite deal, or they hear about this company with hard drives, or they hear about whatever. They don't really care. All they want to know is who's the lowest price, that they get my business. And that's how this is going. So you have all these different things going at once.
Mr. Michael, how much difference 2K and 4K will make for 3D?
I'm sorry, could you say again?
How much difference 2K and 4K would make in 3D?
I avoided that. The standards actually call for both 2K and 4K in the distribution. So, and that's in DCI as well. DCI calls for the capabilities of 2K and 4K. 4K movies will play on 2K projectors. That's an important point to remember, that this isn't a distinction. If a movie goes out as 4K and you have a 2K projector, the standards also say that it should play on that. And that's because JPEG 2000 as a compression technique can support multiple resolutions all at once. So one distribution goes out, but it can play on 2K and 4K projectors. So that's something important to remember if you're buying a projector, that you're always compatible. It's not it's just your decision about which resolution you want to buy. Now the issue of resolution is an interesting one, because our eyes can only see certain resolution from a certain distance, and we talk about screen heights in that way. When the numbers were picked for HD TV, they were assuming that people would sit back about 3 screen heights back from the screen or the television set and watch the picture. And further than that, you can't see a difference, because our eyes can only make out certain detail because our eyes are angular. The further back we are, the less resolution we're going to see on screen. In a cinema, if you sit at the halfway point in a typical cinema, you can see 2K. If you sit further back, you'll see 2K or less. If you sit further forward, then you can start seeing up to 4K. The challenge for cinema owners is that if you try to sell the front seats of the house as the more expensive seats, nobody will buy them, because they all think those are the rotten seats. So that's the challenge with 4K, is that even when 4K movies go out and you have this beautiful resolution and such, you're only going to see it in the closer rows. You won't see it from further back. And that's why you'll hear people like Jim Cameron say, 2K is enough for me. Did I just ruin Sony's parade? Do we get to watch high frame rate? That's what you all want to see. You didn't want to hear this boring talk. All right, so it's glasses time. Now, we're going to see some content, again, that was produced by Dolby Laboratories. It shows flaws, and it shows flaws on purpose, so you can see differences as we get to higher frame rates. So you should kill the lights so that this can be seen. And I'll just speak over the... Now, in the corner of the... We're going to start with a 24 frame per second piece. And in the corner you will see the text that will tell you what the shutter angle is and what the frame rate is. But what I'm going to point out is some of the detail that you want to look at between as we move to progressively higher frame rate. You want to pay attention to the close, the detail of the close. I recommend looking at the, this is a carousel shot of a merry-go-round in a park. And so you'll see the poles that the horses are mounted on, and you'll see the horses themselves. Look at that detail, and look at the motion blur, and look at the detail that occurs. Those are the easy things to look for. Now this shot happens to look good at any frame rate. Here we go. This is also at 250 megabit per second. This is the ISO standard for compression in digital cinema. It's also the maximum set by DCI. Or I should say the minimum performance for media blocks. But again, you can see the bars in the front and the artifacts that creates with the objects behind it. And then look at the details on the horse. And when the motion starts, look at the blur. This goes on for a bit, so your eyes get a chance to adjust to it and remember what you see. So on the poles themselves, you can see the spiral and the blur that occurs. And the details in the clothing. So what you're looking at here is the stationary elements versus the moving elements and the movement that occurs. I believe the next shot's at 48. Now this is at 450 megabits per second. A much higher bit rate. Watch them as they walk behind the bars. So if you remember the motion you saw before, compare that with what you see now. This is the same frame rate per eye that Hobbit will be shown at. And you can look at the spirals on the poles and the clothing details. So that was at 135-degree shutter angle. Hobbit's actually being shot with 270, they tell me. The bit rate that it'll be released at is probably 450 or 500. This is 60. think that concludes our demo. How many saw a difference? If you want a dizzy position, stand here. I think that concludes it. Thanks for everybody for coming. It's a pleasure to be here.